The last episode of Starfleet Academy was, honest to God, one of the worst episodes of anything that has the word Star Trek on it that I've seen in my life. I say this so regularly nowadays, and that's very concerning because when I say it, it's not even hyperbolic. Anyway, the story was so nonsensical that even the writers themselves couldn't keep track of what they said. So I'm going to break down in this video, A, the nonsensical aspect of it, and B, where the writers were so desperate to get their messages in that they just completely didn't pay any attention to the story that they actually told. Hi everyone, it's Az here from HeelvsBabyface. Nonsensical storytelling is a hallmark of Kurtzman Trek. They are too busy trying to virtue signal than actually construct a cohesive story. The last episode of Starfleet Academy took it to extremes. So first and foremost, let's break down where the big problem for this story starts and essentially continues throughout the whole episode. Now, just for some context, the Klingon species is on the verge of extinction due to the event called the Burn, where every bit of dilithium 100 years ago exploded because an alien screamed. I wish that was a joke. It's not. And I'm referring to the whole universe. Okay, so if we can get on board with that, apparently, all of the Klingon Empire used dilithium in their reactors, their whatever, and all of their planets blew up, as well as their spaceships. So the Klingon Empire, as it's still referred to, exists only by going from refugee camp to refugee camp. And this will come up later as well. This pacifist, bird-watching, socially awkward Klingon, apparently, called Jaden, do you get it? Jaden, oh my God, is summoned to the commandant's quarters where he is told some exceedingly bad news. And pay attention to what's said here.
A Klingon ship carrying about 8 houses to a refugee camp on Taurus 7 suffered catastrophic mechanical failure.
So Holly Hunter just said a singular Klingon ship carrying 8 Klingon houses had catastrophic engine failure and it crashed. They don't know if there are any survivors, and the reason why is because getting details out of the Klingons is very difficult because of this.
There was a time before the burn when the Federation and the Klingons were allies. Today, they refuse
everything.
Now here we're already starting to get a little bit into contradiction, because if the Klingon Empire are refusing any help anymore, how are they going from refugee camp to refugee camp where they're receiving help? And who's running these refugee camps? Because those people are clearly giving the Klingons aid. But once again, this is a problem that the writing in this episode has, because it's too keen and eager to get to its virtue signaling. Now, the next part of the show creates an even bigger problem for the plot.
Today, an unregistered heavy cargo carrier with members of the 8 remaining Klingon houses on board suffered a catastrophic mechanical failure.
So members of the last remaining 8 Klingon families, so that's all there is, there's no more, were on an unregistered cargo vessel where they suffered catastrophic mechanical failure and crashed. So the first major question is, why were members of the 8 remaining Klingon families on board a unlicensed, unregistered cargo vessel when they all have their own ships? And just because I want to be uber nitpicky because of the nonsensical nature of this story, An unregistered cargo vessel. Who does it have to be registered with and why? The Klingons are not part of the United Federation of Planets. This is established. So why would they have to register a cargo vessel? And if it's not their cargo vessel, because they're all hitching a ride to a refugee camp, which again, it's stressed in the show itself, then they're accepting help when you've just said that the Klingons don't accept any help of any kind. So already your storyline isn't making any sense. Now, at the end of the episode, we can see the armada of the Klingons, which comprises of at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, maybe 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 30, at least 32 ships. So why are members of the 8 houses breaking up and hitchhiking on a quote-unquote unregistered cargo vessel? But let's now turn our attention to those 8 remaining Klingon houses, and specifically one of them, which is the one that Jaden himself belongs to, which is a polyamorous house with 2 fathers who are not in each other and 1 mother. And that has managed to produce a total of 2 sons. One of them who's gay, which is Jaden, and another one who's dead. Now, the flashbacks that the episode shows happened 16 months ago. So we have Jaden over here, the stringy piece of snot, and then we have his brother here and the mother there. Now, both Jaden and his brother are of mating age, and yet they are complete and utterly secluded from the rest of the Klingons. There's no other Klingon vessels anywhere. There's no hint that they have any contact really with them. And you have to ask yourself, if this planet has an abundance of vegetables and meat and fish and water, why are they A, not just settling down here, and B, this clearly isn't a refugee camp. They've just landed and started to settle. So what is all of this talk about refugee camps? Because this now no longer makes any sense. None of it has to start with. And why, if they have found a planet like this one where they can settle on, are they then moving on to try and find another planet? Again, none of this is established because the show isn't wanting to actually create the rules and the structure. The show is wanting to get to Gaydon's googly eyes with another male cadet to show that he's clearly gay. And it's also virtue signaling, look, the Klingons are now a polyamorous race, which makes absolutely 0 sense when you're on the verge of extinction. So Starfleet Academy and Holly Hunter managed to get one of the Klingon ambassadors to teleport to discuss 2 things. Number 1, whether or not he can find out any information about Jaden's family. And number 2, the fact that they have found a planet in Federation space that is identical to Kronos and its environment, and that they can have it and settle down on. Now, the first part is going to end up being pretty easy to find out news about his family, and yes, they're absolutely fine. Why their family were on that cargo vessel in the first place is a mystery, because they have their own small craft, and that family is dead. They have 2 dads boning each other and a woman who's now not going to be able to bear any children because she's too old. So one of the 8 Klingon families, Jaden's, is dead. Because do you know who else isn't breeding? Jaden. Because he is gay. Now, you could say, well, the Klingons must have breeding programs in place, but you wouldn't know that because this isn't ever established when Holly Hunter and the Klingon ambassador are together. Because if it was true, then the Klingon ambassador would want Jaden to come back into the Klingons to continue to procreate and extend the Klingon race. Because in 32 ships, I don't know how many people are on them, likely very scattered, but if you go by the 5,500 rule of extinction, they're already in massive trouble of a genetic slide, and that's it. Boom, done. Now, recent studies, more recent studies, have shown that really, instead of a 5,500, it should be 5,000. And I don't think there are 5,000 remaining Klingons on those ships. So they need absolutely everybody to do what they can to continue the species. In other words, the female Klingons would essentially be breeding machines right now, and they would be accepting the genetic material of various different Klingons in an effort to make sure that that genetic strain is as diverse as possible. That's the only reason we need to say diverse in this episode. But no, we've got Jaden's two fathers quite happily fondling each other in the woods. The mother's too old, and Jaden's gay. So this whole aspect of virtue signaling a gay Klingon cadet, a polyamorous Klingon house, when there's only 8 remaining, all it does is show that the Klingon Empire wants to die. At least because of far left ideological fucking politics. Gender, intersectionality, and identity politics is going to make the Klingon race extinct. But at least they're stunning and brave. Now, if this was real Star Trek, where there were mature adults actually writing it, and it was the story that was the most important aspect, not the, this is all I know because this is my life, then you could pose some really interesting questions to Jaden. Does his own sexuality trump, don't say that word, trump that of his species continuing? Should he be honor bound to help the Klingon race procreate, even if it comes at the sacrifice of his own happiness? Well, we're dealing with Jaden from Starfleet Academy here, one of the most selfish characters that's ever been created in this universe. So clearly he wouldn't. But if it was given to mature writers, writers who knew what they were doing, writers who could pose questions instead of actually telling you what you need to think, then there could have been some really interesting moral conundrums in this show. But no, we get this instead. Is my family alive? Are my people going to continue to exist, or will they become extinct? Who cares when you can virtue signal a potential gay romance with another cadet? Because the optics here are absolutely ludicrous. Your whole species is on the verge of extinction, and all this guy can do is think about getting his end away with another cadet. Nobody has even taken the moment or time to say, do you know what? The optics on this are absolutely not for this episode. If you want to do this in another episode, go fill your boots. Nobody's watching this shit anyway. But to put it into an episode where your race is potentially going extinct and your family's potentially dead, it absolutely beggars belief at the lack of self-awareness. But I guess the writer could only write what they know, which is that. So if we were to put everything into context here, we have the Klingons on the verge of extinction, where only 8 families remain. They are currently seemingly nomadic, even though they accept the charity of others at refugee camps, but won't accept the charity of actually having a planet to settle down on. They think it's a clever idea to put members from each of the 8 remaining houses onto a singular vessel, which crashes, killing probably many of them. So the genetic pool is reduced dramatically as they are already on the verge of extinction. Even though there's so few Klingons left, approximately 30 to 35 ships, they still think that it's a wonderful idea to allow for gay and polyamorous relationships where their species isn't getting bred any further. And bearing in mind that the burn was over 100 years ago and the numbers of Klingons remaining, they don't seem to have any breeding programs in place to continue their species either. They're quite happy to let members of those 8 families wander off and just go elsewhere, which makes the Klingon Empire even weaker. And of course, the one remaining cadet in Starfleet that's a Klingon is more interested in his own butt stuff than he is continuing the Klingon species. Apparently that's meant to make sense. And the episode ends with the fakest of fake fights that ever faked, in an effort to convince the Klingons that they were in a legitimate battle and that they could claim the world as spoils of war, which in actuality would have been incredibly insulting to the Klingons, and they would have found this disgusting. But the one thing that we have discovered from this latest episode is that all the Klingons are honorless, and they've managed to somehow virtue signal themselves into extinction, which pretty much sums up Kurtzman Trek in a nutshell. It's very easy when you can take a step back and you've seen all that Kurtzman Trek has been doing to understand why they took the Klingons and did this. Because the Klingons are the embodiment of what he would call, Alex Kurtzman, toxic masculinity, or what we would call masculinity. And the reason why they have to get rid of that is because masculinity points towards gender norms and gender roles, male and female, the masculine and the feminine, lines which they've been desperate to blur for so long now. And you can take an idea of a species on the verge of extinction and somehow manage to turn it into a narcissistical story about people doing what they want, regardless of what anyone else desires, needs, or requires. Because these people that use the word empathy so liberally, if I could use that pun, have no idea what it actually means. And so Jaden can run off and have his own gay life in San Francisco. And his 2 dads can have their polyamorous relationship and get up to all kinds of shenanigans or shenanawances in the woods. But all it cost them was the extinction of the Klingon Empire. I'll see you in the next video. You take care. Goodbye, Blue Boo.